A decade ago, D3 opened its doors to the world. The vision was bold, to build a home and hub for design and creativity, aligned with Dubai leadership's wider economic goals and strategies, to create a community to nurture, grow, and showcase creative talent.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie Soar. I'm the Commercial Features Director at the Business of Fashion, and it's a pleasure to be moderating this BoF Live today on Decoding Dubai Fashion Consumer Insights. I am joined by three market-leading experts to unpack this topic today. So Reem Al Aboodi is Head of Business Development at Dubai Design District, or D3, the leading neighborhood in Dubai for businesses within art, design and fashion, and the force behind major events like Dubai Design Week, Dubai Fashion Week, and Seoul DXB. Thank you for joining us, Reem.
Thanks, Sophie, and thank you, Business of Fashion, for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be part of this conversation with amazing speakers, and I'm really lucky to see things up close on how Dubai creative and fashion landscape is growing and changing, and I'm looking forward to it, to this conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you. We are also joined by Jasmina Banda, who is president of joint ventures at Chalhoub Group, a leading luxury retail in the Middle East that represents hundreds of global brands, including Versace, Jimmy Choo, and Jacques Mus. Great to have you with us, Jasmina.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much, BOF, for the invitation. I'm really excited for this conversation about our very dynamic market and super glad to be here with Rawan and Reem.
Thank you very much. And we also have my wonderful colleague, Rawan Maki, who is Head of Advisory at BoF Insights, the Business of Fashion's data think tank and advisory team. Thank you, Rawan.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. And likewise, I'm very excited to be here with Jasmina and Reem and just to unpack, all these insights on Dubai, how it's developing. It's just such an exciting city, but I think particularly at this time. So very excited for the conversation.
Thank you. So thank you also to our audience for dialing in today. And please do let us know in the chat where you are dialing in from. We always love hearing from you. And we have received a lot of questions in advance from our audience. So I will look to share as many of these with our panelists as we go. And hopefully we'll have a chance to get through as many as we can. So earlier this year, BoF released a white paper in partnership with D3, co-authored by myself and Rawan and another colleague of ours on the BoF Insights team. The paper was called Inside the Fashion Opportunity in Dubai, and it dives into consumer and retail trends and wider business opportunities in Dubai's rapidly growing fashion industry. Regional and global businesses are really vying for market share in Dubai, with the UAE one of the fastest growing apparel markets worldwide, with a compound annual growth rate of 5% between 2024 and 2030, according to Euromonitor data. The global average is 3.7%. And to ground the paper in proprietary insights, we drew on an exclusive survey conducted by Rowan and her team of more than 1,000 Dubai residents to better understand their expectations and consumer behavior in the city. Now, as a city that evolves at such a pace, from its population size to monumental infrastructure and digital investment, today we wanted to dive into some of the learnings from the report, but also add some new insight on this topic. We're going to end the session on actionable takeaways as well, and strategies from our panelists on how global and regional brands can really best enact these insights. But first, let's briefly set the scene on the Dubai fashion and retail market. And to do so, Rowan, I'd like to come to you first and start by asking, how is the Dubai fashion market staying resilient despite the current global economic environment that is really marred by trade uncertainty and geopolitical turbulence?
I think that that's a great question, and to start kind of setting the scene in that way. As you mentioned, Sophie, there's the kind of growth prospects, for Dubai through to 2030, around a 5% CAGR annually, and that really outpaces both regional but also global markets, and it's particularly that which makes Dubai so interesting, commercially but also culturally for brands to, to set up and to grow, and that that's driven by several factors, and I'd love to hear Jasmina and Reem's inputs on this as well, but I would say one of the key things there is there's a strong domestic and regional demand in terms of the population. So there's a bit of a dual demand base that gives Dubai a bit of an insulated, essentially an insulated consumer environment compared to even some other economies in the Gulf itself. And so there you have some consumers that are among the highest spending per capita, but you have both, Emirati shoppers, but you also have, a local population of expatriates that are, willing to kind of spend, and then you have the tourism that comes in and out. So in a way, the populations themselves and the way that that works, essentially they can buffer against both cyclical, but also kind of cultural moments throughout time. So I think that's definitely a part of it. And I hope later in the conversation we also get to speaking to how we reach these different customer bases in Dubai, because I think that's always a very interesting one. I think another one, and I know Reem will be able to expand on this one, but the government infrastructure and the policy investment builds an atmosphere of certainty, I believe, for retailers and for brands and for actors within the fashion industry in Dubai. And so I think, certainty allows for planning, allows for investment. And I think that is quite unique about Dubai as a city. So the level of trust that comes with that certainty from the leadership and the governance is quite unique. And then I think lastly, and this is more on the experience side and more on kind of how to reach the customer, I think that experience-led consumption in this moment in time is really differentiating Dubai from more price-sensitive markets where either that's more saturated or essentially, the offering is going in different directions. So, for example, in markets, sometimes even in kind of Western fashion economies where consumers are trading down, you actually see that in Dubai, shoppers are prioritizing experience, service, and exclusivity. And this makes the market less vulnerable at this particular moment to things like, pricing pressure globally, because value is defined a little bit more holistically. It's the service you get, it's the speed of delivery, it's, the private clienteling. So I think there's a little bit more layering there in terms of what value the customer is getting as opposed to just price and product. So I think those are some of the factors that are contributing to the resilience of Dubai in this moment.
Thanks, Rowan. That's really useful, though, to think of those sort of three different areas that you mentioned there. And I think picking up on that first point around the sort of consumer demographics of the individuals who both live and travel to Dubai. Jasmina, maybe I'll come to you then and think a little bit about drawing a distinction, I suppose, across vastly different consumer cohorts within Dubai, whether that is regional consumers and residents or the growing expat community as well, which does make up the vast majority of the UAE population. What sets the Dubai consumer apart regionally, and how are you as well catering to the distinctive consumer cohorts of resident versus tourist inflow?
I think it's a very good question, and maybe to build on what Rawan said earlier, just now, we have those diverse populations and we need to cater to them. It is very different than cities such as, Riyadh or even Abu Dhabi or Kuwait in the region. However, it is not that different to some of the global cities. I mean, when you look at cities like Paris, they have local consumption, which is strong, but they have even bigger tourist consumption. So in that sense, I think Dubai is behaving like a global fashion capital and is experiencing these consumptions that are not unknown in the world. I think Rawan correctly said we have the local population, or locals in Dubai. Those are Emiratis. We have local residents, such as myself, who love luxury, enjoy buying in the shops, but are expats who live and work in Dubai, but moved in from somewhere else. And then we have the tourists. I think also for tourists, it's important to differentiate type of tourists that we have, because we have, and I would maybe look at two different dimensions, maybe it's even a matrix. We have tourists that come regularly. So we basically have folks that come every year, spend month, two, depends on their lifestyle and what their personal lives allow, and they always return to Dubai. They might have a second home, or they might rent through an Airbnb or stay in a hotel, but they come regularly. Those are tourists, but they behave slightly different. They will shop in Dubai Mall, but they will also shop in some of the smaller malls, which for a one-off tourist, we actually don't see such behaviors. So I think there is that frequency of coming to Dubai, because we really indeed have a lot of people who come frequently. And then there is the other dimension, which is nationalities. We have a lot of different nationalities, but we also have a lot of Middle Eastern consumers from Saudi and neighboring countries shopping in Dubai. There actually currently are number one or number two, depends on the brand, tourist population shopping in Dubai. They also behave differently than maybe tourists shopping from London or India, which is also a meaningful tourist population, or Russian tourists and so on. So I think there are really a lot of nuances, and as we work with more than 300 brands, it's very important to cater to all of them. There are some operational ways we cater to them. We need to make sure we have staff in the stores that can cover majority of the languages that our customers speak, because not everyone is super fluent in English. We need to make sure that the sizing is correct, because our customers who are maybe from one region versus the other, they might be on a small size, on a bit of a larger size when it comes to sizing, or purely fit. Or the type of fashion they wear, whether it's more modest fashion or whether it's more something, open. There are different needs. So we need to make sure that in the shops we cater to all of that. And then when it comes to marketing and presence, we also need to make sure to tick it off. When we want to appeal to our local customers, we make sure we are in a relevant media. We make sure we use relevant ambassadors or faces. If we want to appeal to a Russian clientele, it looks quite different. So when we do editorials for some of the main magazines, we make sure we take people or faces or personalities that fit more that clientele. So there is a lot of balancing. However, I would say it's not so uncommon for a global capital.
That's really fantastic insight, and I think speaks as well, when you're talking about ensuring sizing and languages are reflective of where different individuals may be used to different sizing and languages as well. Speaks to what Rawan was saying around the kind of convenience factor and making sure that it does speak to the experience that people expect from their luxury store, or just generally their fashion shopping experience. Reem, I also wanted to pick up with you on another point that Rawan mentioned at the beginning around the investment level and the way in which the infrastructure is changing within the city. This is very much being driven by the Dubai Economic Agenda, or D33, driving in more residents, scaling manufacturing and logistics hubs, investing heavily in digital and infrastructural developments. We could go on for an entire BoF Live about just that in and of itself. But I wanted to ask you, as sort of succinctly as possible, to tell us what you believe has driven the most amount of change in Dubai and its consumer landscape in recent years.
I mean, when I look at what really changed in the past few years, I would like to tap on into three factors. The first thing, as Jasmina and Rawan mentioned, is growth. So Dubai just passed 4 million residents, and last year we welcomed almost 19 million international visitors. That's huge and diverse customer base, and it keeps on growing. And the second thing, as Rawan briefly mentioned as well, is the government vision. The Dubai strategy is about it's all about doubling up the GDP by 2033. But what really means for fashion is opportunity. What does that mean? Better infrastructure, easier business setup, and new visas, and a clear plan for the design sector. So, for example, this strategy is actually backing up 500 design businesses and hosting more than 100 international events by 2033. That's really huge. And the third thing is our customer base. So we have more than 200 nationalities here, and that creates a mix of Arab heritage and global influence. We're also seeing a shift on how people experience fashion. It's not just about shopping anymore, it's about culture, events, community. And this is exactly what we've built at D3, where fashion sits with design, art, and innovation. I mean, we've seen it firsthand. It's in just about now this year is 10 years. We've grown into a hub of 1,100 creative businesses and over 20,000 professionals. We're home to Dubai Fashion Week, Dubai Design Week, Seoul DXB, and we're expanding. So we are about to launch six new buildings in Q1 2028, and all of this to support the growth of the creative community. I mean, D3 is not just about showrooms and offices. It's an ecosystem. You see it in education. We have DIDI, which is the Dubai Institute of Design and Innovation, where they prepare the next generation of designers. And then we have the N5 Design, which is an incubator. It's like a launch pad for startups and entrepreneurs. And on the specialist side, we have L'École, which is the School of Jewelry Arts, and it's all about building that craftsmanship. And then we have FAD, for example, which is the Institute of Luxury Fashion and Style, where they connect students directly to the world of luxury fashion. So all of these together, all these platforms, it creates a pipeline from learning to launching to leading, all under one roof. So that's what makes Dubai's growth in fashion and design so powerful. It's holistic. It brings every part of the value chain together.
Thank you, Reem. And I think as well, talking about bringing all different parts of the value chain together, you can see, as you've mentioned, that there is this sort of strength behind the industry that we are not necessarily experiencing in other parts of the world as well. And before we start diving into some of the more specific consumer insights, Jasmina, I wanted to come back to you because thinking about luxury, I think more specifically, and you also cover not just fashion, but I know jewelry as well, and other aspects of the sort of wider luxury market. We are, of course, experiencing a global luxury slowdown, a result of consumers trading down on the categories they are spending in, as well as a tarnished reputation impacting a number of luxury brands around quality and even ethics as well. However, in the BoF Insights and D3 survey that I mentioned earlier, that Rawan's going to give us a bit more information on shortly, there was one insight that was that some 55% of respondents to that survey selected luxury apparel, accessories, and footwear as an unexpected or as an expected top 5 discretionary spend outlet for them in the next 3 years. So really is suggesting that the global luxury slowdown is potentially not translating to the Dubai market as it is elsewhere. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that too, and why that is happening.
Absolutely. I think, we have a fantastic group of people internally at Chalhoub Group called our intelligence team. Sounds like CSI, but basically a talented group of people that regularly analyzes the market, researches the market, and tries to understand with consumer insight what is kind of happening. And that team proves that the whole Middle East, but in particular Dubai, is overperforming the global markets today when it comes to luxury. So when the global market is actually declining or maybe being flattish in the last quarter, if you combine all players together in the Middle East, we have a high single-digit growth, and in Dubai, that growth is about 2-3 points higher than the average of the Middle East. So very strong performance. Now, why is that the case? I think what Reem and Rawan mentioned earlier, there is the economic growth. Since COVID, Dubai in particular has been growing immensely as an economy and as a city. When it comes to population growth that Reem just mentioned and crossing the 4 million people, when it comes to a number of companies being established, when it comes to high net worth individuals moving to Dubai, which is the #1 place in the world when you look at the net inflow of ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals. So there is simply more economic activity, there is more money to be spent, and then there is a great offering that the brands offer. One of the things that we didn't mention so far, and I would like to highlight, is that Dubai is incredibly safe. And when the city is safe, that means that you can really not just buy, but also enjoy the purchases that you have. I was yesterday in US. Today I'm actually, I flew yesterday in, and today I'm in Latin America. When I go out, I need to think twice, which watch am I going to put? Am I going to wear my engagement ring, or if I need to flip it around, or if I'm going to take it off? These are not issues that you face in Dubai. You can walk with your Rolex, with your Patek, with whatever your diamonds all around, and it's very unlikely something will happen. And that means you can enjoy those luxury purchases and wear them. I think that economic growth, safety aspect, and simply lifestyle, when we talk about in particular residents, but also tourists, it's a fun place to be. You have so many restaurants. I mean, I don't know, I cannot even follow how many new restaurants, excellent restaurants open every month. You have concerts, you have events, galas, different types of things where you actually get a lot of opportunities to also wear pieces that you buy, whether it's fashion or watches and jewelry category. So these are some of the things that make it really a special market. And I think what also I find fantastic, that even with the global macroeconomic situations, with the war in Ukraine, with the escalation in the war in Gaza, we still manage to maintain peace in UAE, and we managed to kind of look at the positive sides of life and have minimal possible impact on a day-to-day.
Thank you for laying that out and just sort of explaining a bit more on the sort of like wider context there to our panelists. And what I want to do now that we have that backdrop laid, is to dive into the consumer insights. So Rowan, I'm going to come back to you and ask that you briefly explain a bit more about some of the insights from the resident survey that we were talking about earlier. And I also would love to understand from you as well what really fit into some of the hypotheses that you had, and what potentially surprised you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a bit of a brief on the survey itself and kind of its parameters, so we were here surveying 1,000 Dubai residents to just really understand, their preferences, what they like to spend on, but also their predictive behavior. And so really how they're prioritizing fashion within their discretionary spend. And I think, one interesting, I guess, hypothesis that we had that was confirmed, and kind of building as well on what Jasmina said, is, fashion and luxury remain these core discretionary spend categories. And, you see the numbers even compared to equivalent surveys that, we have seen and run in markets like the UK and kind of more Western markets to just be a lot higher. So, for example, 55% of those in the survey, and these are Dubai residents only, they rank, luxury fashion in their top 5 discretionary spend. And I think you were referring to this metric earlier as well, Sophie. But when you compare that, to a market like the UK, that's only 38%. And I think it comes down to a lot of those factors as well that Jasmina described, in terms of it's not only, a perfect place for supply and setting that up, but the consumer experience there expands beyond purchase. So your ability to wear to different kinds of events, and the variety as well. And we're seeing a lot of expansion in that as well. So new experiences that pop up that require new modes of dress. I think people tend to associate that story more closely with Saudi Arabia because of the change that's happening there. But I think in Dubai, it takes a very different shape as well, because it's already a much more mature market, but you still have more of that variety opening up as well. So I'd say that was a hypothesis confirmed, because that's something that, even anecdotally, and in terms of operating in the region with our clients as well, we see that often, kind of that willingness to spend from the customer. Maybe something that was a bit of a surprise is that, the respondents to the survey confirmed that there was a broadening interest in kind of, more modest fashion demand. And it's not surprising in the sense that, we believe that there's a decline in kind of Emirati culture or codes or anything, but it's more that young professionals essentially are adopting contemporary styles and kaftans and abayas, and that's not even staying stable. That's actually going up. So, we even had a stat from the survey where around 40% of all of those that filled in the survey said they're more likely to purchase when a brand collaborates with Emirati talent. And I think that's very interesting. And it shows the impact not only of local pride, but also really a desire for investing in kind of homegrown pieces as well. I think one that, perhaps is less exciting stylistically, than kind of talking about styles was omni-channel. We saw that omni-channel convenience is really non-negotiable, for the customer in Dubai. So the survey showed really strong expectations around seamless digital and physical integration, which I think anybody that has lived or, worked or had clients in Dubai can also understand that. So, there's this very popular choice of buy online and pick up in store. And that was actually, the favorite choice of how people would like to purchase, with a higher preference than home delivery on one end and a higher, preference to full in-store shopping. So the blend was extremely appreciated. And I think it's really one of those retail economies where you can feel that blend in practice. So the retail footprint is part of your daily life. You go to the mall to walk, to meet a friend, or to kind of blended areas, like D3, which are, retail, but also mixed use. But at the same time, the online, offline equation is only becoming more and more important. And I think there's still so much room for online penetration to increase, whereas in other markets, of course, it's more saturated.
Thank you for diving into those different sections there. In terms of the retail experience, I'd love to get into that in a little bit more detail, but we'll save that for a bit later, because first I want to go into the styles. You actually answered a question, I think, from somebody in our audience, Katrina McLeod in New York, who had said, how has customer sentiment around modest or conservative fashion changed recently, which you very much addressed there. And I just wondered, Rowan, just to stick with you very quickly, if there were any other kind of product styles or trends that also came out from the survey that particularly resonated with the Dubai consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw that luxury apparel and accessories dominated in terms of preferences. So those two, so the customer there is prioritizing iconic bags, which, I'm sure many global brands will be happy to hear about, because, so many brands we now hear are coming with their new it bag, as well as footwear, and sort of luxury apparel in particular. So I think these are categories that still point to kind of aspirational, but also practical investments as well, right? So a luxury handbag is a lifetime investment essentially for the person that purchases it. And the other categories are more aspirational, about, really driven by the occasion to be able to wear and display these, as Jasmina mentioned earlier. So, for example, like, Balenciaga's Hourglass bag or LV's Never Full, those remain bestsellers in Dubai, actually. And, both products are actually slowing in Western markets. So it really is, when you look at the sales data and the data that we have captured in the survey, you could really see those parallels. And with the context of understanding what's driving that desire to own these, it does all come together.
And Jasmina, you mentioned as well the Chalhoub Intelligence group too, and I would imagine they're reflecting on these kind of insights all the time. Can you tell me a little bit about how you reflect on some of the insights that Rowan has just shared on the Dubai consumer that you engage with at Chalhoub Group?
So I think if I think about some of the interesting insights about the consumers, firstly, they travel a lot. When we look at the local population, whether it's Emirati or non-Emirati residents of Dubai, as well as tourists, they're frequently very well traveled, which means that the offering that we need to provide in stores, both in terms of merchandising, the collection, look and feel of the store, and the service by the staff needs to be as close as possible or better than what we do in some of the other parts of the world. So a lot of expectations from the brand to deliver, and the brands that are not on that level usually struggle. So when you go on any sort of review platform, I don't know, Google reviews, for example, that you can see, and when people say, it's a nice store, but it's not, the service is not as good as in pick a city, these are usually brands that struggle. So there is really understanding that it's not anymore just some Middle East, because Middle East is about 3-4% of the global luxury market. So it's not big as a region, but basically understanding that it's a very important region, and in particular Dubai, which today represents about 60% of luxury market of the whole Middle East. That means that you cannot really compromise on the service. We also need to understand that many customers or residents and Emiratis living in Dubai shop a lot abroad. So they're some of the top customers of the brands in Paris, London, Rome, Milano, and so on. So the experience that you give them here in Dubai also translates from brands later on in the sales and the performance that we see in the rest of the world. Other thing that for me is very interesting in Dubai is the importance of the word of mouth. This is something that in the Western world, where important is usually declining in terms of relevance, while in Middle East remains one of the key ways how customers discover new brands, new products, as well as engage with them and decide to shop. We see it actually heavily in beauty segment, some to an extent in fashion, but I think fashion is less fragmented. There's less brands in that high-end space, but in beauty we actually see it a lot in prestige beauty, the importance of word of mouth. And then finally, on the styles and on the relevance of Emirati culture, like Rawan said, many of our brands work closely with local artists, local influencers, KOLs, to call it in a usually term that we use for Asia, work extensively with them basically to do special editions, special collection, make the brand more relevant to the local clientele, and so on. These are some things that we see as being very, very relevant for the market.
And Reem, how about yourself? How is it that you reflect upon what's been discussed from both Jasmina and Rawan there? What do you think is resonating the most with the businesses that you see performing particularly well in terms of certain styles or product launches?
I mean, those insights really ring true. They reflect exactly what we see every day at D3. People here want experience, not just products. Our creative mix is diverse. We have the global brands, independent studios, and students. And our audience is just as diverse, Emirati, regional, international. And that's what makes Dubai such a unique style capital. I mean, as the survey, half of the residents said that fashion is one of their top cultural touch points, and it's even higher for women. So the demand covers couture, modest wear, Ramadan, Eid collection, streetwear, resort wear. So what really ties it all together is the appetite for exclusivity, something made just for them and designed with a story. So Dubai Fashion Week shows this perfectly. We've had homegrown names like Mrs. Kipa, Dima Ayad, Michael Cinco, with big international houses like Manish Malhotra, Roberto Cavalli, Carolina Herrera. More and more global brands now see Dubai as a must-show stop, tailoring collections for this region. What excites me the most are the collaborations. So designers mixing regional craft with global trends, or brands syncing with our cultural calendar. And that's when the audience really connects, because it reflects who Dubai is, rooted in heritage, but looking forward. Beyond Fashion Week, Design Week in November brings together more than 1,000 designers with installation, exhibition, talks. So it shows that fashion here is part of much bigger creative ecosystem. And what's interesting is that the consumer here isn't passive. They influence how brands behave. We've seen international designers adjust their collections for Dubai, and local designers rise because of the strong demand for authenticity. So that dynamic is very unique to the city.
I also wanted to ask, I think, as well, a question that's come through from somebody in our audience, Jude Green, asked a very interesting question that I don't know I'm looking for a volunteer, I think, to answer it, which is, where are global brands underestimating the expectations of Dubai's new generation of luxury buyers? Who would like to take that? Rowan, I'm looking at you.
No, I'm
I'm
having a
thinking.
think.
Ron, you go ahead.
Maybe I'll go first, but then
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts around on this. So we talked about digital and penetration and how saturated that is. I think that's one angle. I think there's something about making digital a more exclusive experience as well. I think, Reem, to your point, there's that current of exclusivity that really resonates culturally and can be a driver. I think there's something that is really under leveraged in online platforms enhancing the luxury experience as opposed to just being another omni-channel access to the product. So something like offering privileged access. I know, for example, Dior live streamed its men's show with a sort of Dubai specific influencer commentary. And then, so I would say the majority of competitors still use social media in a very broad global broadcast way. So there's something there about cutting through the digital atmosphere in a way that has more exclusivity. And, again, we sometimes see that some of our global clients, the way they think about exclusivity is the way they create communities as well is very creative and very niche and tied to particular subcultures. I think we've yet to see that for Dubai, and that's kind of the next stage, which is, is there a subculture of a woman's group that love to read and they're extremely intellectual, or they love to paint, and you get to them through engaging them very intellectually locally, or just really kind of cutting through what are sub communities instead of more generic digital advertising. So that's both digital and in-person communities. Um, I think that's one. And then I think one that I'm interested in seeing where it goes, but naturally it has a commercial ceiling. And it's been there for a while is personalization. I think it's an interesting market for that. But again, smaller brands will be able to do this. With bigger brands, there's a natural ceiling. I think that it's just more ripe there than other markets. So those are two that I'm kind of interested to see where they go.
Yeah, absolutely. Jasmina, do you have something to add?
Yeah, maybe a few examples. I think Rawan correctly pointed that the customers here expect a lot in terms of digital, but I don't think it's only digital. I think it's generally when it comes to the service. We have a large store in Dubai called Level Shoes, which is 10,000 square meter shoe heaven. That store delivers in Dubai in 90 minutes. When we have new brands coming to, and it really works. The other day I ordered, it was actually 63 minutes until the delivery person rang on my door and delivered my pair of shoes. And when we have Western brands coming into the region, the idea that no, we cannot deliver next day or in 3 to 5 days or whatever that kind of customer promise is, that usually comes as a surprise, because 90 minutes to be able to do across the whole city with the current traffic levels, you need to have multiple delivery hubs across the city, fulfillment centers. The other thing is in the store as well, the service. I mean, things that we discussed with the new ready-to-wear brands entering the market. You need to have a tailor in shop. It's not an option to take measures, send it somewhere, and 1 week later have a customer come to the store and pick it up. For a luxury brand, you need to have a tailor. You need to be covered for the full shift, which usually means 2 to 3 tailors in the store. Well, it needs to be done in a record time, and then people expect a white glove service delivery to the home. It is something that you find in some countries around the world, but not in all. So these are some of the examples of services and things customer expect that is not always common around the world. I always tell the story of one of the brands in Dubai that I will not name because it doesn't work with us, but it's interesting that it's a brand that has their own patisserie inside. So you go in, you have their own chef that prepares their own desserts, and then you come and you eat, a beautifully prepared, a world-class dessert while you shop product. I've I've seen that brand all around the world. I'm not sure in how many places they offer this. So that expectation of the service, whether it's pure service around the product you buy, whether it's having a pleasurable time in the store, is something that brands really need to over-index to be successful in the Middle East. Now, in Dubai in particular. Now, what's very interesting is this is such a strong market that you could open, you can miss to do all of these things. You can just ignore them and you would still probably do well, but you would not reach the full potential that you can reach if you really tick all the boxes of customer expectations.
It's great to be diving into some of these like key strategies and sort of learnings and takeaways. And something that I want to put to all of you, I think, is actually providing an example of either an international or regional brand that you believe is doing this really well and resonating with the local consumer and the regional consumer, and why. And Reem, maybe I'll come to you as to provide a first example.
I mean, brands that adapt their global story to Dubai's culture really stand out, tapping into the rhythm of the year here, whether it's Ramadan, Eid, or a creative milestone like we have Dubai Design Week and Fashion Week. And we've seen luxury brands do this beautifully. For example, Loro Piana would create Ramadan collection that resonate deeply with this market. It shows that they understand the culture momentum and the consumer mindset. Exclusivity is a big thing. So people here love firsts, whether it's a limited drop, first to market launch, or behind the scene access. It really creates a buzz. And people here care about what the brand stands for. So not just what it sells. Sustainability is a big thing. A lot of Arab youth say that they've always make eco-cautious choices. And supporting local talent, designers, artists, influencers. It really shows that you've invested in the community and not just the market. The mistake some global brands make is treating Dubai as just another retail market. But here, culture matters as much as commerce. The brand that stays for the long term, build relationships, and invest in the community are the ones that really last.
So thinking about sort of making sure you're putting forward your brand values front and center, knowing that the younger generations care about those pieces, whether it's sustainability or any other aspects too, and engaging in the culture, all fantastic examples there. And thank you for the example too of Laura Piana. Jasmina, do you have a particular brand in mind that you think is resonating well with the local consumer?
I think if I think, I mean, most of our brands do Ramadan collections. They do collaboration. You know, I can think of Dior of a Ramadan collection. I can think of a collaboration of Louis Vuitton with a local artist on the fragrance during Ramadan, or Max Mara Ramadan collections and so on. But one brand that really stands out for me is a brand that is in jewelry segment. It's actually Chaumet, a brand from LVMH portfolio that in the region has very clear present, very clear following from the local clientele, that has managed to really well convey the story, do the storytelling about the brand, and that it's actually seeing that on a global level. So when we look at the share of Middle East in that brand's global sales, it actually over indexes versus what we see in others, simply because the team and the fantastic GM that we have in place there has managed to really connect well with the local clientele and provide exactly the types of service, the types of storytelling, and the types of relationship to make it happen.
And Rowan, can you give us an example too of a brand?
Absolutely. I do want to say on the Chaumet example, I believe that was the exhibit in Doha as well, right, Jasmina? With there was it was a very beautiful weaving of the story of Chaumet as kind of a brand related to royalty, but then bringing that to the context of the Gulf. And I heard about that from several people as well in the industry. I haven't had the pleasure of going myself, but I think it's absolutely that where, you know, so there's this idea of brands that localize meaningfully. The one that I had in mind, you know, was Gucci and what they've done kind of locally. I think their activations, you know, in D3 and kind of like their boutique redesigns, you know, they've brought in kind of within Mall of the Emirates, you know, different basically artists, local artists as well, that I think that really resonates without taking away from the core identity of the brand. Then I think for the Ancora collection, yeah, it was for that collection as well. They had a series of events, you know, also kind of throughout D3 that really, you know, embedded the brand into local culture beyond kind of a one launch. I do think as well, you know, there's the category of brands that infuse locally, culturally really well, and that's what we're talking about. There's something related, and I know Yasmina, you could have so much to say about that as well. But I think there's a category of brands where it's also they excel through operational excellence, and I say that because that's essentially exactly what, you know, Chalhoub brings and does in the region. But when you look at players that have to create that kind of infrastructure for themselves, locally, like, like a Nemshi or Noon, a lot of times, these kind of big e-tailers as well. I think that's where it's interesting that essentially they often win against, for example, global brands also trying to come in without that infrastructure. So when you look at Nemshi and Anoon versus ASOS that came in and struggled to grow, um, logistically, really, in the region, I think that's also an interesting story. Of course, for other foreign brands coming in, through partnerships locally, that's exactly what they get, is that level of operational excellence. But I think we focus so much on the cultural story and fit, but really what underlies it has to be this excellent execution and operational, essentially tight operational ship. And that's what delivers on that excellence and that bar that we're all talking about when it comes to Dubai.
Finding the right partner, presumably, to be able to do that, to enter the market in the way that you want to. We actually spoke for the white paper. We spoke to Nafsika Scorties, Stephanie Scorty, who mentioned a very similar thing around, competing as a emerging brand in the region with then some of the larger players who are able to deliver in 63 minutes to your door a pair of shoes, which is something else. I'm conscious of time, so I will look at starting to wrap up and just ask the last couple of questions to you. One of which is that, we've touched on retail, we've touched on different product designs, we've touched on various different strategies in trying to engage local artists or thinking about other ways in which you can try and immerse into different sort of cultural nuances across the Dubai consumer base. And we've also touched on word of mouth as well. But one thing we haven't actually touched on is leveraging digital platforms to the most effective way, and really thinking about how it is that social media can potentially be better leveraged in connecting with the consumer base here. Obviously, Dubai has got a very wide-ranging number of influencers and key opinion leaders. You were talking, Jasmina, earlier actually about having sort of different individuals representing the different cultures to try and target. But I wondered if there was any further insights that individuals could share and that any of you could share around thinking about really tapping into digital platforms to make the most of targeting that consumer base. Potentially, Rowan, I can come to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, kind of tying back to this idea of, earlier I kind of mentioned different sort of subcultures and targeting people in these, almost thinking of them as more niche. So I think the way that I see kind of the next wave of using digital and social media and understanding customers, it's I guess not only reaching them but understanding them first. And I think this falls in a little bit of, I'm surprised AI hasn't come up yet in this conversation in this day and age, but it falls in the one element that I think there's a lot of conversation around AI, but really where we're seeing value and driving value for our clients is using that to understand their customers, more than anything, more than kind of internal integrations, more than everybody using these internal shortcuts. But it's really, how can you use data at a large, so say across tens of thousands of data points across all these different platforms we have access to say, okay, I have 5 types of customers. And most brands and most retailers have a really good understanding of that segmentation already. Like, who are the 5 customers? Taking it to the next level is saying, how exactly do they act? How exactly do they act on Instagram? The same person, are they even on TikTok? How do they act there? And then that brings you into your not only marketing and activations and how you target them, but in general, thinking about your investment in terms of converting them, where does that go? So there might be a type of customer that it is really worth pursuing on social media. There are brands, and we've worked closely with them as clients, and it becomes more challenging where their customer isn't necessarily on social media or they're not necessarily following. I mean, Bottega takes that approach, of course. So I think there it's about, taking the age that we're in, taking the kind of, AI sort of ability to understand data at a large, and it's about targeting customers in that way. And I think that's the next wave of digital globally, actually, not just for Dubai. But I think it would be particularly interesting for Dubai, where the customer is very online, is very kind of digitally savvy. And this could really determine, how to make the investment towards them the most efficient.
Thank you, Rowan. And Reem, I also wanted to ask you as well. We've mentioned about different regional consumer events and different sort of activations that a lot of international and regional brands will tap into. Ramadan's come up a number of times, and Eid too. But I wondered what other kind of aspects and parts of the events calendar and the sort of cultural calendar across Dubai global brands can better tap into to make the most of targeting the consumer base.
That's a really tough one. But if I have to say one thing, I would say Dubai's consumers are global, they're connected and very demanding. So the brands that really listen to them will win, not just here, but worldwide.
So understanding from them a bit better about what sort of events they would potentially want to receive based on their preferences. And I wanted to sort of close out by asking all of you, reflecting on either the conversation that has been already, or to think a little bit about something that maybe we haven't yet brought up. Is there sort of one overarching learning or insight from the conversation today that you really want to emphasize for our audience as we close out this conversation? Jasmina, let's start with you.
Maybe I would say two things that we haven't touched upon that I think are very important for the market. First one is we are running out of retail space for luxury. So our malls are full, 99.999% occupancy. And any new brand that we have, we struggle today to find space. We struggle to expand existing brands, which we would need to do to improve the experience, but we also struggle to find space for the new upcoming brands. Which brings me to my second point that we haven't. So I think there's a lot more growth to be captured if we can resolve that matter. And the second thing that we haven't mentioned is that there's a whole list of upcoming brands or new luxury brands that I believe could make a significant difference on the market. As Chalhoub Group, we are very excited about our existing portfolio of strong legacy brand, heritage brands that are growing and doing fantastic new things. But we're also very excited about Jacquemus. We're also very excited about Zimmermann. We're also very excited about Jill Sander or Maison Margiela, brands that are not necessarily new in age, but new to the market or new to the, reinventing themselves and really making marks around the world that we would like to see more present in the region and in Dubai, and that we see a lot of customer appetite for.
Fantastic. Reem, same question to you. Key learning or insight from the conversation today, or something new to add?
I mean, for me, being at D3 and seeing this growth up close is really inspiring. It's just a reminder that when you create the right ecosystem, creativity flourish. And that's exactly what's happening here in Dubai.
Fantastic. And Rawan?
Yeah, so maybe I'll say two things. One that I got out of this conversation, and one that I think is an interesting fact that we didn't touch upon. So I think to start with the sort of interesting sort of fact, this was coming out of our survey and work on Dubai as well, but we found that there's more a desire for a wider assortment in Dubai in terms of SKUs versus other markets. So there's, in Dubai, the residents are 10 to 40% greater and, expecting a wider choice. And I think the reason that's interesting is because when you think of your product mix as a brand, you're essentially hedging against a particular product. So I think that has very direct implications for retailers and brands in the region. And it also shows shows them, how picky the customer is and how much choice they do want to have on the ground. I think the other one, which we touched upon in this conversation a little bit with, the Nafsika Kurti brand is that there is that kind of, emerging a niche space for brands. We've been talking, I think, about kind of bigger and more established brands, but I think that space is also very interesting, and it's part of the formula of a customer that wants choice, and also that is becoming more experimental culturally, and I believe will only continue to be so. So I think there is space for that as well. It can be a little bit logistically, more challenging, but also to Reem's earlier point, an organization, like D3 is also there as a cradle for that kind of growth. So I'm very excited to see what happens there, in Dubai and in the region with niche designers as well.
Fantastic. A lovely note to end on, I think. Thank you all so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure learning more from you and gathering your insights. Reem, Jasmina, Rowan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you also to our audience
Thank
for
you
dialing
so much.
in. Thank you. Thank you to our audience for dialing in. In case you missed anything, this content will be available on demand. And don't forget to check out the full white paper as well, free to download on businessofashion.com. Hope to see you all again soon. And thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sophie. Thanks, Jasmina. Thanks, Reem.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.